All right. Hello, everybody. So I think a very common family tradition is to go to the beach at some point during the summer. I know my family generally goes down to Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. And normally during this time, we'll take a trip down to Assateague, where the horses run. We'll go see that area. And they've got a really beautiful set of wetlands out there. And that really inspired me for this project to talk about coastal wetlands restoration. Because in our trips, I started to notice different efforts that are going down in Assateague and various places like that to save the wetlands because they are being degraded. So to start, the problems, what's happening essentially. Essentially, the wetlands are disappearing. Through time, through erosion and farming, the land is being degraded. Specifically, a lot of the wetlands land was taken to be used as farms because as people expand, you need more farm areas. They're like, oh, we'll just use the wetlands. It's got a lot of nutrients in the soil. It's super good. So people took it and are farming on it. And that causes a lot of issues. We've discussed in class already the various effects of farming. Basically, it loosens the soil because there's a lot of plowing. You're pulling plants in and out of the ground. That combined with hurricanes that happen along the coast and just overall ebb and flow of water, the land's just going away. Not to mention with farming, we talked about pesticides use and overuse of that, and that's causing issues with the water. So in order to understand how these problems work, let's talk about the benefits of the wetlands. The biggest benefit of the wetlands is that it stores carbon super well. The soil is just built to hold carbon for long periods of time. So in the erosion of the soil, we're releasing carbon into the atmosphere and into the ocean, and we're increasing CO2 emissions essentially through this. So we really need to understand that it's super important to keep this land intact to store carbon better. The second benefit is it provides an ecosystem. There are so many wonderful aquatic animals and plants that live in the wetlands of Florida, of Louisiana, across the world, in Assateague, all of these places, and we really need to protect them because they're losing their habitat, and that causes all sorts of other issues. And finally, water filtration. The water in wetlands collects nutrients and sediments and allows for the water to go from being salty to fresh. The most common example I think of is the mangrove trees in Florida's wetlands, where they just, over time, like as you go through the swamp, you go from fresh water to salt water. It just happens. And that's super, super important for when we need water. So what's happening right now? Right now, there are shoreline reparation projects going on. Specifically, the examples that I'm talking about come from Florida's restoration projects. They use these 4 different concepts: marsh creation, river diversions, ridge restoration, and hydrologic restoration. All of these work pretty well, but they come with a couple different hindrances, I guess. So marsh creation, you relocate excess sediment from digging canals or other things where you'd move sediment around and you put it into old marshes essentially. Because marshes start out shallow and over time they sink and sink and sink and sink because it gets pulled out to sea. So by taking the sediment and replacing it, you're setting the bar up higher and you're basically rejuvenating that ecosystem. River diversions is moving the water so it will flow back to the wetlands. As cities have expanded and like residential areas has expanded, we've cut off areas and through farming again. So river diversions pull that water through, open up areas to put water back into the wetlands. Ridge restoration, ridges are these small barrier islands along the coast. They're super important because they are the first line of defense against hurricanes. And they also offer a break spot for various migratory birds. So they're super important. Similar to marsh creation, you relocate excess sediment that you would build up from these cut digging holes for the river diversion. You take that sediment and create or build up various islands along the coast. Super important. And then finally, hydrologic restoration. This is basically the big sister to river diversions. It's more intense, includes like similar concept of controlling river water and moving it into the wetlands, but on another level, normally involving like pipes that carry water across levees, all that kind of stuff. And all these are going on, and it's super great. The hindrance here though is money and moving of sediment and that kind of stuff, because it requires serious amounts of funding to get the stuff to move and requires that stuff to exist. So those are the 2 big hindrances. The more realistic, I say realistic, it's a part of it's out there, part of it's realistic, goal is perennial farming. in the futuristic kind of ideal, this means for like genetically modifying plants to be long-lasting, year-round type things. So instead of having your wheat only be in the ground for I don't know, from spring through summer and harvest in the fall, you'd have spring through summer, harvest in the fall, and you'd have another thing go from fall through winter. Just a continuous cycle of not necessarily replanting, but the plants just grow back by themselves naturally. Unfortunately, this doesn't exist right now. It would require serious genetic modifications to various crops in order to achieve this. It could happen in the foreseeable future, but it would require more scientific evidence and more research to be done. But I look forward to that. I think that'd be super exciting. But in that same vein, the more realistic thing that we could start doing is planting more trees. I know a couple weeks or a month ago at this point, Shippensburg sponsored the planting of trees over in Bird Run, which is sort of like a wetlands. So a similar concept here. You'd be planting more trees within the wetlands, and that would hold the soil together better. It provides shelter for coastal life. There's so many benefits to trees. Again, keeping that CO2 in the ground and out of the air. That is the most important aspect of wetlands, is that it really, really helps lower our CO2 emissions. And then finally, the biggest step by far is to educate the younger generation. We talked about a lot in our class that education is like the biggest step we need to take towards a lot of these environmental impacts. So teaching the younger generation to take care of the environment and showing them the beauty of the wetlands, that way they will love and care for it in the future. Once we pass on, we got to continue these reparation aspects. So it reminds me, so I mentioned my family takes a trip to Assateague, and there are so many opportunities down there. The visitor center has they've got little touch and feel tanks for plants, and they show you how to properly handle wildlife so that you don't disrupt the ecosystem. My family and I did a little kayaking tour of the bay, where we got to go clamming and see these animals. We got to see the horses. They took us and they showed us how to properly interact with the crabs, see the fish, just these kind of goofy little things. But I know for my younger sisters, that's made an impact on them, and they will remember that. So that way when they go there in the future without our parents, they're gonna know, oh, we don't touch that, or oh, we do touch that, or oh, here's what we can do to help. So these education programs exist, and they're super, super, super important towards the betterment of the wetlands and the coastal wildlife. It is of the utmost importance that we push for further education. Another concept is field trips. Those have such a lasting impact on kids. I know that you can remember a very important field trip that you did with your class. So for schools along the coast to do things, the whole school plants a tree thing in the wetlands, or to take a trip and go see the wildlife there. It is just really important that the education system supports these restoration efforts in order to continue the work that we are putting into these programs. Of course, it's great that we are getting into it as college students, but we really got to get the elementary school kids on board. We really do. I got to get my sisters in it. You got to get your cousins in it, your friends, all of that. Everybody needs to be on board for this to be successful, a successful event. So finally, here are my sources. You should have been filling out the handout during this presentation. If you have any questions, please email me. I know that I talk fast, but I really want you guys to understand this stuff. I really love the wetlands. They're super cool. So let me know if you have any questions. Good luck with the rest of your finals, and have a great day, everybody.